Now welcome to our today's science lesson, that is standard 8. Today is 16th. Now it is on a subtopic excretion. Now in science, that is on human body, we have the systems that we learn from class 4 and to class 8, where you started by talking about the digestive system, the reproductive system. We talked of the circulatory system. We talked of the excretion system. Now today I'm going to take you through the excretory system. That is the excretion. Now the excretion, when you talk about excretion, we have to understand the term excretion. Now the definition of the term excretion, this is the process by which we get rid of the waste products, or we say it's the removal of waste products from the body through respiration. Now the process by which we remove waste products, is respiration. But now the due process that occurs is called excretion. Now, what is the definition of the term respiration? Because the definition of the term excretion is the removal of waste products from the body. Now, respiration, this is a chemical. It's a process by which now the chemical is a chemical breakdown of food with help of oxygen. Is the chemical breakdown of food with help of oxygen, and this one helps to release, number one, we release energy through that breakdown, we release carbon dioxide, and also we release water. Now this is carbon dioxide, or in short it's written CO2. This is carbon dioxide, in short is written CO2. Now when the food has been digested, they have to be broken down. And the process by which it's broken down to release energy and carbon dioxide together with water is what we call respiration. This is what we call respiration. Now, after understanding the definition of excretion and the definition of respiration, we come to now those excretory organs, the excretory organs and their products, their respective products. Now, the excretory products, we only have 3 excretory products. That is the skin. We have the skin as number 1. We have the kidney. We have the lungs. Those are the 3 excretory organs. Now, you can be asked in your exam, which one of the following is not part of the excretory organs? So you should begin and understand these 3 main excretory organs. And what are the specific products that are excreted or released or removed from the respective organs? Now when we start with the skin, this is now the skin. With the skin we have the release of excess water. We have the release of excess water. We have the release of excess salt. We have the release of excess urea, and lastly the release of lactic acid. Now we talk of the release of excess water because water is needed in our body. But now when we have excess, when we have more of this amount of water, it will lead to difficult and it may bring health issues. Now we have to release the excess one. We also have to release the excess salt, excess urea, and lactic acid. Now the combination of excess water, the combination of salt with urea and lactic acid, it gives us what we call sweat. It gives us what we call sweat. Now for you to say this is sweat, it must consist of excess water, salt, urea, lactic acid. When we move to the excretory products in the kidney. In the kidney, we have the 3 main excretory products. Number 1 is the excess water. We have urea and we have salt. Now when somebody goes to urinate, he or she brings out what we call urine. Now the combination of excess water, urea, and salt, it gives us what we call urine. Urine is the combination of excess water, urea, and salt. Now those are the excretory products in the kidney. We move to the third, excretory products and excretory organs and its products, that is the lungs. Now the lungs is used for breathing. So, you know, when you breathe in oxygen, which is used, but now there is a release of another gas which is called carbon dioxide. Now carbon dioxide is released from the lungs. So that's why we say the lungs are the excretory organs. Now carbon dioxide does not come out alone, but it comes out with a combination of water. Now when you breathe, when you take a piece of glass, then you breathe it by use of your nose, you'll get that there is some of the moistures. With the glass will have some moistures. So the moistures is caused by the presence of water in the air. Now we have those organs that most of the people think they are part of the excretory, the excretion. They are part of the excretory system, but they are not part of the excretory system, which they always bring confusion to students. That's why I decided now to underline them. They are not excretory organs. They are not excretory organs. Which are those? This is the anus, the rectum, and the heart. The anus, the rectum, and the heart is not part of the excretory system, or is not part of the excretory organs. Now why is it that the anus and rectum are not part of the excretory organs? The two are part of the digestive system. Now these ones, they release the remains from digestion, but not the remains from excretion. You know, we have the process of respiration. The respiration, the products that are released are the ones that are now released outside. But now here, they are the products, they are organs of the digestive system. Now you get the remains. Those are now the process where the digestion takes place. That is the removal of undigested material. It is take place in the anus. Now when you talk of the heart is part of the circulatory system. It just pumps blood to other parts of the body and also carry out its effective functions. Now today we are going to deal with the first organs, which is now the skin. We are going to talk about the skin in now an elaborate way. The skin, this is the skin, that is a rough part of the skin. I decided to draw a rough part of the skin so that you can understand what we are going to talk about here. Now the skin is made up of the two main layers, or the two main parts. Now the two main parts of the skin, we talk of the epidermis and the dermis. Now when you talk of the epidermis is the outer or the upper layer of the skin. This one here is the epidermis. Now this one, when you take this, that is the epidermis. This is now the epidermis. But now the dermis, the epidermis, we said is the outer or the topmost layer. Now when you talk of the dermis, now immediately after the epidermis, the remaining layer inside here is what we call now the dermis, Now the epidermis and the dermis, it consists of some parts which we are going to discuss. We are going to discuss the dermis and its layers. We'll talk also of the epidermis with its layers. Very first, we start with the epidermis. We start with number one, the epidermis. What are these layers that if you are asked in exam to name the layers that make up the epidermis, are you able to name them? Today I'm going to give you the way forward. Number one, the epidermis consists of the sweat pores. We have those pores on the top of the skin. When you look directly to your skin, you may find that we have those sweat pores, and even during sweating, you will get that now there is a lot of water. That water doesn't come out that easily, but it's because of the presence of the pores on the skin that enables now the sweat to come out. The second part that now it's very essential, we have the three main layers. If somebody asks you to give the three main layers of the epidermis, if somebody asks you to give the three main layers of the epidermis, number one, you talk of the confined layer. The confined layer is the topmost, the one that you are just seeing. That is the confined layer. The confined layer is made up of some parts. It is made up of some parts, and these parts, these are the dead cells. It is made up of the dead cells. Now, what is the function of the confined layer? If somebody asks you, give the function of the confined layer. The confined layer, this one consists of dead cells. if it consists of dead cells, now it protects the inner layer of the skin. This one gives protection to the inner layer of the skin. That's why if somebody cuts you the upper layer, you will get that even wind, if the wind blows, if sand comes in, it will just enter the skin. But now this one protects the skin from either germs, from the entry of the germs. You may get, we have the presence of germs. Now the conified layer protects the skin, internal layer from the germs and other injuries. Number two, we talk of the granular layer. The first layer conified, the second layer is the granular layer. Now the granular layer is just a layer immediately after the conified layer. Is a layer immediately after the conified layer. That's why we say it is below the conified layer. From the conified layer, the second layer is what we call the granular layer. What is the function of the granular layer, or what is it made of? It is made of living cells. Now these living cells, they make up the new cells of the conified layer. If somebody just cut you, after a period of time you will get that that place has healed. What causes healing of that place, and why is it that now the part will then again be looking the same with the other part that was not cut? This is the presence of the granular layer, which replaces the conified layer that was removed from the skin. Now the third layer, we talk about the malfission layer. We talk about the malfission layer. Now when you're talking about the malfission layer, this is now below the granular layer. We started by the conified layer, the granular layer, now we move to the malfission layer. Now what is the main function of this malfission layer? When we're talking about the malfission layer, it contains the color pigments. It contains the color pigments. It contains the color pigments. And when you hear the term color pigments, it brings us to where now, why is it that some people are black, others are brown, and others are yellow. So you can take it just from the malfission layer. The malfission layer, it contains what we call melanin. This melanin is the one that now determines the color of the skin. If somebody asks you which part of the skin determines the color of anybody or the color of the skin, you talk of the malfission layer that contains melanin, which now determines the color of the skin. Now it also replaces now the granular layer. If the granular layer are worn out, it is now replaced with the malfission layer. It replaces the worn out granular layer. We say the granular layer replaces the conified layer. The malfission layer replaces the granular layer. That is all about the epidermis. That is all about the epidermis. We move very fast to the dermis. Dermis, we say the dermis is the inner layer. We said it's the inner layer. The epidermis is the outer layer. Then the dermis is the inner layer. When you look here, this is the upper layer, the outer layer. Then the other part are the dermis. That's why we said it is the lower. It's the lower part of the skin. Is the lower part of the skin. Now, what are the parts that is made up of the dermis? What are the parts that make up the dermis? The dermis is made up of, number one, the blood vessels. It is made up of the blood vessels. And when you are talking about circulatory system, you talked about the circulatory system consisting of blood vessels and the heart. And you discussed all about the blood vessels, where you talked about the veins, the arteries, and the capillaries. So when you look here, we have the veins. When you look here, we have the arteries. But in between the veins and the arteries, we have what we call the capillaries. So the blood, we have the capillaries, we have capillaries, we have the veins, and we have the arteries. So you must understand that inside the dermis, we have, this is the dermis. Now the veins, arteries, and capillaries are found in the dermis. Number two, it is made up of the hair follicle. Now when you talk of a hair follicle, this is now where, this is the hair. Now a hair follicle, this is the tube, this tube here that comes within from the dermis. Now is where now the hair grows from. The hair grows from the hair follicle. The hair follicle is a tube from where the hair grows. The hair grows. This hair you see in your skin, it is grows from the hair follicle. Number three, we talk of the sebaceous gland. The sebaceous gland. Now when you're talking about the sebaceous gland, when you talk about the sebaceous gland, now the sebaceous gland has the main functions. The main function of the sebaceous gland, number one, it is made of the hair and the skin. It makes the hair and skin supple and waterproof. It makes the hair and the skin supple and waterproof. Now, why is it that we are talking about the hair, the skin being supple and waterproof? You know, the skin does not allow water to enter into the body, but now the skin only allows water to come out, the excess water to come out. But what makes this skin now to avoid water from entering? It's because of the presence of the sebaceous gland. And when you talk about the sebaceous gland, this is the sebaceous gland. Now it is the oily gland. We say it's an oily gland. Now the main function of the sebaceous gland, we say it makes the hair and the skin supple and waterproof. Waterproof, it means it does not allow water to enter into the skin. Next, we talk about the nerve endings. We talk about, that is number 4, we talk of the nerve ending being part of the dermis. When you talk of the nerve ending, this is now the part at which it is also called the sensory organs. That is, the nerve endings are also called the sensory organs. And when you hear the term sensory, it means it detects or it senses if there is change in temperature, if there is change in the mood, maybe somebody has touched you. What sends the sense to the mind is the sensory organs or the nerve endings. So it detects the changes in environment. Environment is a general word. You can't talk of change in temperature. You talk of change in either a touch, somebody touches you. So that is all the changes, or coldness or hotness. That is nerve endings they detect. Next, we talk of the subcutaneous fat. The subcutaneous fat. When you hear the term fat, you know the main function of fat. Now the fat, it keeps the body warm. This one keeps the body warm. In the skin, or on the skin, inside the skin, we have what we call fat. That's why we'll come to see on the functions of the skin, you will come to see that the skin also, it stores fat. Now the main function of the fat is just to keep the body warm, so that you get more when you have a lot of cold, but your body will remain warm. There will be no change in temperature inside your body because of the presence of the subcutaneous fat. Next, we talk of the sweat duct. The sweat duct. Now when you are talking about the sweat duct, I hope I've drawn it. This is now the sweat duct. This one is the sweat duct. The main function of this sweat duct, because it comes from the sweat gland, it comes direct from the sweat gland, because it comes direct to the from the sweat gland. Now the main function of this sweat duct, it's just to channel. It channels the sweat from the sweat glands to the sweat pores. It channels the sweat from the sweat gland to the sweat pores. We'll come to discuss the sweat gland, and we'll see the function of the sweat gland. Now the sweat duct is said to be the part of the epidermis, and also you have the sweat gland, which is part of the dermis, which is part of the dermis. All of them are a part of the dermis. Now that is the function of the sweat duct. Then we move to the function of the sweat gland. The sweat gland. Now we said sweat duct channels. To channel is like just a passage. It passes the sweat to the skin. Ndio sasa imalize itoke nje, it is through the sweat duct. Now the sweat gland now produces, this one now produces the sweat. It produces the sweat. Now this sweat, it's now produced from the sweat gland, then passed through the sweat duct to the sweat pores. The sweat pores are the pores on the skin. Now from the sweat pores it evaporates. Sasa ndio utapata wewe umesweat throughout the day, then after some time you get that there is no any water on your skin because of that evaporation that has occurred from the sweat pores. Then when you talk about the sweat gland, how does they function? When somebody asks you how are the sweat glands adapted to their functions, how are the sweat glands adapted to their functions, tell that person, or the answer will be, it is coiled. They are highly coiled, and the reason why they are highly coiled is because they have to reabsorb, or they have to absorb more water, they have to absorb excess salt, they have to absorb excess urea, and also they have to absorb excess lactic acid. Now after the sweat glands absorb the more water, it accesses excess water, excess salt, excess urea and lactic acid, it's then transported to the sweat ducts, then to the sweat pores. Now this one, that is the main adaptation of the sweat glands that enables it to carry out its function of producing sweat, because we said sweat is the combination of water, salt and urea and lactic acid. Now if somebody asks you what is the process by which this sweat is removed, what are these processes? Because everything when you talk about it is a process. What's the name given to sweating? The name given, or the process that involves sweating, is what we call perspiration. Is the process by producing sweat. Perspiration is the process of producing sweat. The process of producing sweat. Now after learning all about the epidermis, the dermis, and all the excretion and the parts of the skin, we have the functions. We have the final part of this discussion where we talk about now the functions of the skin. What is the main function of the skin, if somebody asks you? Now from the discussion you can give the functions, because we said we have fat, so it stores fat, it's there. We said it is excretion, that is, it carries out excretion of sweat. That is number one, excreting sweat. So the function number one is started by excreting of sweat. Excreting of sweat, and excreting of sweat is a combination of water, salt, urea and lactic acid. Number two, protection of the underlying tissues and organs. From the start we said the dermis here, we said the granular, that is the confined layer, we said it contains dead cells that now protects the inner layer of the skin. Here the function of the skin, we say protection of the underlying tissues and organs, and I was specific there. I said this protection, it is against germs, against injuries of the internal tissues, because the internal tissues are very weak, so they are protected by the skin. The function number three, it has got nerve endings, and we say the function of the nerve endings, we said it is a sensory organs also. So the function of the nerve ending, we said it does to sense. That's to sense the change of heat, if there is heat, to sense if there is cold, and to sense if somebody has touched you, and even the change in pressure and pain. So what will make a person feel like he's having pain is because of the presence of the nerve endings on the skin. So if somebody touches you here, you will have to sense, and the information is sent to the mind, and you realize that no, there is increase in temperature, no, there is decrease in temperature, you go and to wear a sweater, no, somebody has touched me, that is because of the presence of the nerve endings. Reason or the function number four, we talk about the storage or store of fat. The storage or store of fat. We talked about the storage of fat in the subcutaneous. The subcutaneous fat, that is now the fat, that is the skin stores fat. In human beings, we'd say or animals, they have fat. But when you talk about plants, we say the plants have oil. So we say in animals we have fat. So we as we are among the animals, so we also have fat. We also have fat. What is the function of fat? I said here, to keep the body warm. To keep the body warm. And we have also other functions of fat, where now if there is less amount of water in the body, if you take a long period of time without taking water, the fat, if you take a long period of time without taking water, the fat, this fat is we say it is metabolized. We talk of metabolization. It is metabolized, and when it is metabolized, it is broken down now into water and other useful substances that now can be used in building your body and keeping you going. So production of energy, when it is metabolized, production of energy and production of water. Then we talk about the function number 5 of the skin, we talk of the manufacture of vitamin D. How does the skin manufacture vitamin D? That now brings us to the reason why most of the time when you wake up in the morning, somebody sits on the sun because of now to take this vitamin D. That manufacture of vitamin D is from sunlight. It is from sunlight. It is from sunlight. So the skin manufactures vitamin D, but it doesn't manufacture vitamin D in darkness, but it is from sunlight. Then lastly, we talk of the control body temperature. The control of body temperature. Now when you talk about the skin controlling body temperature, it brings us back to the subcutaneous layer where we said it warms the body. If the temperatures goes very high, what happens to the subcutaneous layer? If the temperatures goes very low, what happens to the subcutaneous fat? The subcutaneous fat, if the temperatures are very high, it moderates the temperature to the body requirement. And when the temperatures are very low, it also controls the body temperature. Now these are the 5 functions of the skin. Now as I say daily, somebody can bring you a question and ask you which one of the following is not a function of the skin. Which one of the following is not a function of the skin? Now if you asked about that, you should have already gone through the 5 or the 6 functions of the skin, so that if we brings there breathing, you say no, breathing is not part of the functions of the skin. So in short, I say you have to understand very well the functions of the skin. Now we can say this. Finally, I can summarize by saying this. When you are talking about the excretion, you have to understand the definition, you have to understand the organs, we have to understand the products, the organs and its products. Then you have to understand the specific. Now when you talk about the skin, you understand the parts of the skin, you understand the functions of the skin. Thereafter, you should also understand the kidney, you should also understand the lungs. And inshallah, next time we are going to talk about the kidney and the lungs, their functions and their parts. So you keep following, because this is a continuous process. Education is a continuous process. Thank you very much. God bless you.